Lena Foster nearly tripped over a janitor's mop bucket as she rushed around the corner of the fourth floor at St. Vincent's Hospital, a bouquet of daisies clutched in one hand and a half-eaten granola bar in the other. Room 413. Room 413, she muttered under her breath, scanning the room numbers as her sneakers squeaked against the tile. She hadn't seen her best friend, Tessa, since the emergency appendectomy 3 days ago. Between double shifts at the cafe and taking care of her rescue cat who'd decided to develop an ear infection at the worst time, Lena had been stretched thin. But now she had the day off, and nothing was going to stop her from checking in on her friend. She stopped outside the white door, knocked, and peeked inside. "Hey, sunshine," she grinned, slipping in. Tessa sat up in bed, hair a frizzy mess and eyes tired. "Took you long enough?" "Don't start," Lena laughed, tossing the flowers on the side table. "I brought your favorite candy and a list of the worst hospital food substitutions I could find online. I'm prepared to roast this place with you." Across the wall, muffled voices and the beeping of machines filtered through from the next room. Lena barely noticed. She spent the next 30 minutes making Tessa laugh so hard she had to clutch her stitches. When a nurse came in with meds, Lena stepped out into the hallway to give them privacy. Just as she leaned against the wall with a sigh, the door next to her creaked open. A man stepped out, tall and sharp in a navy button-down that looked like it cost more than her rent. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, icy blue and observant, landed on her like she was the only person in the hallway. "Everything all right?" he asked. His voice was calm, settled. Lena blinked. Yeah. Just visiting a friend." He gave a small nod, then glanced at the daisies sticking out of her tote bag. "You brought flowers." "Daisies," she said. "Simple, but they last. Unlike hospital pudding." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, not a smirk, but something softer. He extended his hand. "Isaiah Jennings." She hesitated, then shook it. His grip was warm, steady. "Lena Foster." "Nice to meet you, Lena Foster." Before she could say anything back, a man in a suit approached Isaiah and whispered something. He nodded, turned to her, and said, "Maybe I'll see you around." Then he was gone, back into the room next door. Weird. But Lena had bigger things to focus on, like convincing Tessa that the hospital's Jell-O cups weren't secretly growing legs in the fridge. 3 days later, Lena returned with homemade muffins and a deck of cards. Tessa had improved, sitting upright and full of sass. But it wasn't her friend that made Lena pause as she stepped off the elevator. It was the man standing just outside the next room again, sleeves rolled up, speaking quietly to a nurse with a tablet. Isaiah looked up and caught her eye. A slow, surprised smile spread across his face. "You again," he said. Lena tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I guess we're neighbors now. That's the best thing that's happened to me in this place," he said without missing a beat. She snorted. "You must be really bored." He tilted his head. "Not anymore." They ended up talking in the hallway for 10 minutes. She learned that he was recovering from surgery minor, he insisted, and that he hated the hospital coffee more than she did. She didn't ask what he did for a living. He didn't offer. But the next day, when she showed up with real coffee from the cafe where she worked, he was already waiting outside his room. "You remembered," he said, accepting the cup like it was a miracle. "I keep promises," she replied. "You're dangerous," he said, sipping. "You could ruin a man's standards like this." By the 5th visit, they were talking like old friends. "I still don't believe you're not secretly a food critic," Isaiah said, finishing the muffin she'd baked. "And I don't believe you're just a boring finance guy," Lena teased. "You look like someone who gets invited to yacht parties." He laughed but didn't confirm or deny it. What Lena didn't know, what she couldn't possibly guess, was that Isaiah Jennings wasn't some average guy recovering from a random surgery. He was the founder and CEO of Jennings Capital, a private investment company worth over $90 million. His penthouse overlooked Central Park, and his car, currently parked in a private VIP garage, was a custom midnight blue Aston Martin. But for the first time in his life, Isaiah didn't want to lead with that. Because Lena Foster was different. She wasn't impressed by designer labels or status. She brought him coffee with a smile and asked how he was sleeping. She didn't know who he was. And he liked that. Too much. On the 7th day, Tessa was being discharged. Lena came to help carry her stuff, stuffing socks and magazines into a tote. Isaiah was standing at his door again, arms crossed, watching her. She approached him, holding a muffin wrapped in foil. "You're next, right?" "I got cleared this morning," he said. "But I haven't left yet." "Why not?" He looked at her for a long second. "Maybe I was waiting to ask something." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Ask what? Would you have dinner with me?" She blinked. "Like a real dinner?" "Yes. No hospital food. Real food. Real table. You and me." Lena opened her mouth, closed it, then grinned. "If there's bread that doesn't come in plastic wrap, I'm in." He chuckled, then pulled a small notepad from his pocket and scribbled an address. 7 o'clock tonight. Dress however you want. She glanced at it. "This is the Silver Room. Best restaurant in the city. Isaiah, are you—" "Come," he said gently, cutting her off. "Just come." She nodded slowly. "Okay." As she walked away, Isaiah stayed in the hallway, heart pounding. He hadn't felt this way in years, and he was falling hard. The cab stopped outside a tall, soft-lit building with black marble steps and frosted glass doors. Lena stepped out cautiously, her heels clicking against the stone as she stared up at the understated sign, "The Silver Room." There was no flashing neon, no garish menus posted by the door. Just two men in tailored suits at the entrance and the low hum of a piano floating out each time the door opened. She adjusted the thin strap of her navy dress and hesitated. The truth was, she tried on 4 different outfits before settling on this one. It was the only thing in her closet that didn't smell like espresso or have a threadbare cuff. She'd borrowed a clutch from Tessa, who, of course, had insisted on curling Lena's hair before she left. "You look like the kind of woman millionaires regret letting go," Tessa had said as she clipped a silver earring onto Lena's left ear. At the time, Lena had laughed. Now, standing in front of what might be the most exclusive restaurant in the city, she wasn't so sure this was still a joke. A man at the door stepped forward. "Miss Foster?" Yes." He gave her a polite nod and held the door open. "Right this way. Mr. Jennings is expecting you." Her heart gave a strange flutter. Inside, the room was all dim lighting and soft velvet. Golden sconces lined the walls. Tables were spaced far apart, each one candlelit, each one surrounded by people who looked like they'd never had to check a bank balance in their lives. And then she saw him. Isaiah was already standing, his jacket draped over the back of his chair, a single cuff rolled up to the elbow. He looked at ease in a refined, effortless way, like the table was merely an accessory to him, not a privilege. But then his eyes landed on her, and whatever casual cool he'd worn vanished in a second. He stood straighter. His jaw tensed, then relaxed. And for a brief moment, he looked like he'd forgotten how to breathe. "You came," he said quietly when she reached the table. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I hoped you would," Isaiah replied. "But I've learned not to expect good things without working for them." As she sat down, he slid a wine list toward her. She glanced at it and raised an eyebrow. "There are no prices on this." "That's intentional," he said, his tone dry. "If you have to ask, they assume you shouldn't be here." "How charming," she muttered, then looked up at him. "You're not really a finance guy, are you?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, watching her carefully. "I run a private capital firm," he said finally. "Investments. Acquisitions. That sort of thing." She blinked. "So, you actually are a finance guy?" He tilted his head. "In the sense that I know how to turn 10,000 into 10 million. Casually? I prefer to let the numbers speak for themselves." The waiter arrived before she could process that, pouring water into crystal glasses and offering a wine recommendation that sounded like it had been aged in a castle. Lena nodded absently. Her mind was still on Isaiah's words. When they were alone again, she leaned forward. "So why didn't you tell me?" "I like that you didn't know," he said simply. "That you looked at me like a man, not a resume." "I still don't know what to look at you as," she admitted. "You're a bit of a riddle." "And you're not?" Isaiah asked, his eyes gleaming under the candlelight. "You show up at a hospital with muffins and sarcasm and somehow make me forget I was there for surgery." Lena laughed, but then grew thoughtful. What were you there for, really? My brother, he said after a pause. He was in a car accident. Minor injuries, but he needed someone to sign off on some post-op decisions. I stayed a few nights to keep an eye on him. Her expression softened. Is he okay now? He's a stubborn idiot, so yes. He's fine. I'm glad, she said quietly. The food arrived plates so artfully arranged they looked like exhibits. Lena hesitated before taking a bite, half convinced someone was going to scold her for touching it. As they ate, conversation flowed easily. He asked about her job at the cafe, and she told stories about customers who ordered oat milk and left with someone else's smoothie. He asked about her apartment, and she described the creaky windows and the cat that thought it owned the place. You're the first woman I've met who talks about a cat like it's a business partner, he said. She pays rent and judgment, Lena replied. Isaiah chuckled, then leaned closer. You know, I've been to dinners with royalty, politicians, CEOs. And none of them have made me laugh like this. Lena looked at him, really looked. Beneath the polished exterior, the expensive suit, and the self-assuredness, there was something else. Something careful. Guarded. You don't laugh much, do you? She asked. I do now, he said. After dessert, a cloud of something citrusy and impossibly delicate, he walked her out. The air was cool, the city buzzing softly around them. A sleek black car waited at the curb. The driver stepped out, ready to open the door. Lena stared at it. So, you really are that guy, she said under her breath. Isaiah turned to her. Does that change anything? She was quiet for a moment. No. But it explains a few things. He opened the car door but didn't gesture for her to get in. Instead, he stepped aside, giving her the choice. No pressure, he said. I'll call you a cab if you want. Or I can take you home. Or if you'd rather just walk with me for a bit, I can send the car ahead. Walk, she said without hesitation. Let's walk. His smile was quiet. Grateful. They walked 3 blocks in silence before she spoke again. You said you don't expect good things without working for them. I did. So what are you working for now? Isaiah looked at her, and this time there was no teasing in his expression. No veneer of charm. Just honesty. You. 2 weeks later, Lena stood in front of a heavy glass door with the kind of hesitation she hadn't felt since the first day of college. She wore black jeans and a cream blouse that still smelled faintly of vanilla from the cafe's pastry oven. In her hand was a bottle of mid-range wine she'd picked up on the way over, unsure if it was appropriate. She wasn't even certain if he drank. The doorman had greeted her by name. Isaiah's apartment building was the kind of place people took pictures of from the sidewalk. Gleaming limestone, wide black awnings, discreet security. The elevator had no buttons, just a fingerprint scanner and a concierge who'd given her an assessing glance before offering a polite nod. Now, standing outside the penthouse door, Lena wasn't sure if she was underdressed or simply out of her depth. The door opened before she could knock. Isaiah stood there barefoot in dark slacks and a white shirt rolled at the sleeves, holding a glass of water. You made it, he said, stepping aside. You weren't sure I would? Lena handed him the wine. I was hoping you would, he replied, setting the bottle on a side table. The apartment was silent in a way only expensive places could be. No creaking floorboards, no distant neighbors. Everything was expansive and minimal. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline like a photograph. The city lights glittered in the distance, but the space felt cocooned, private. She followed him to the kitchen where something fragrant simmered on the stove. You cook? She asked, surprised. I try. My grandmother refused to let any of us grow up helpless. What's in the pan? Lamb ragu, he said, stirring it with a wooden spoon. Don't worry, I didn't make the pasta. I know my limits. She leaned against the counter and glanced around. This place is unreal. I don't spend much time here, he said. It's too quiet most days. She thought about that. You don't like quiet? I don't like empty rooms, Isaiah said, then lowered the heat on the stove. Not anymore. They ate on the terrace, city lights stretching endlessly in every direction. A jazz record played softly from somewhere inside, the kind of ambient music that made everything feel cinematic. Lena twirled her fork, watching him across the table. Is this normal for you? She asked. Inviting women you barely know to your penthouse to hand-make slow-cooked pasta? Actually, this is the first time I've made dinner for someone here. She blinked. Seriously? He nodded. I've hosted fundraisers, meetings, tastings. But no one's ever sat at this table across from me like this. Why me, she asked. Isaiah set down his fork. Because you didn't ask for any of this. You weren't impressed by any of it. You've never looked at me like I was a prize. And you like that? I need it, he said. She looked down at her plate. I'm not sure I belong in this world. You don't have to belong to it, Isaiah said. You just have to be in it. With me. The wind picked up slightly, sweeping her hair across her shoulder. The air between them shifted, less casual now, more charged. I've never dated someone like you, Lena admitted. And I've never met anyone like you, he replied. She hesitated. I don't know how this works. What you expect? I expect honesty, he said. And time. And maybe a chance to show you that I'm not just a man with a view and a bank account. She met his eyes. That's a start. He stood and offered her his hand. Come with me. She followed him through a narrow hallway into a room lit only by the glow of the city. There were glass cases lining the far wall, each holding something different. A metal compass. A cracked leather journal. A child's painting framed with care. What is this? She asked. Reminders, he said. Of who I was before all this. She stepped closer to one of the cases. Inside was a faded photo of a boy on a rusted bicycle. That's me. Age 12. I used to ride 6 miles every weekend to sell lemonade outside the marina gates. The security guards let me through because I'd always bring them free cups. Lena turned to him. You didn't grow up with money. Not even close, he said. But I learned early that persistence gets you past gates. She walked to the next case. A cracked chess piece carved from wood. My father made that, he said quietly. He was a janitor. Taught me how to see 3 moves ahead in life and on the board. Lena looked at him, her voice low. Why are you showing me this? Because I don't want you to think this is all I am. The penthouse. The suits. The restaurants. That's where I ended up. Not where I started. She stepped closer to him, her breath catching slightly. You think I'd walk away because you have too much? I think people walk away for all kinds of reasons, Isaiah said. And I don't want to give you one. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Lena reached out, taking his hand. You're not giving me a reason to leave, she said. You're giving me every reason to stay. His fingers tightened around hers. Then stay, he said. Please. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. She leaned in, her lips brushing his with a softness that made everything else fall away, the walls, the past, the city beyond the glass. When they parted, her voice was barely above a whisper. I wasn't expecting this. Isaiah's thumb traced the back of her hand. Neither was I. Isaiah stood by the edge of the rooftop garden, the wind tousling his curls as the sun dipped low behind the skyline. Lena stepped through the glass doors, her heels soft against the stone. She wore a dark burgundy coat, now open, revealing a simple cream blouse and dark trousers. Her cheeks were flushed with the cold, her eyes bright with something he hadn't seen before, certainty. You weren't joking about this view, she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. I never joke about a good sunset, Isaiah replied, handing her a warm mug. Cinnamon tea. You mentioned it once. She blinked. That was weeks ago. I didn't think you were listening. He looked over at her. I always listen to the things that matter. They stood in silence for a moment, the city stretching out beneath them, the air between them humming with unspoken decisions. I got the job, Lena said suddenly, her voice steady. Assistant events coordinator. It's not glamorous, but it's full-time and I won't have to work double shifts anymore. Isaiah's eyes lit up. That's incredible. Congratulations. I start next week, she added, sipping the tea. I'll have weekends off too. Maybe I can learn what it's like to sleep in again. He laughed softly. You deserve that. She turned toward him, her expression more serious now. I didn't take it for the money. I took it because I want something that feels like mine. Something I can build. Isaiah nodded. I wouldn't expect anything less from you. I've been thinking a lot, Lena continued. About us. About how easy it is to get pulled into your world and forget who I am. But I don't want to lose myself. I don't want to become someone who just fits into someone else's life. He set his mug down and stepped closer to her, voice low, unwavering. Then don't. I never wanted you to change, Lena. I want the woman who made me laugh in the hallway, who brought muffins to a hospital and refused to be impressed by anything but honesty. She searched his face. But you have to admit, She gestured to the garden, the penthouse towering above the city. This isn't a simple life. No, Isaiah agreed. But it can be a life filled with meaning, if we build it on our terms. Both of us. She looked at him for a long moment. I don't want to be a guest in your story. Then write it with me, he said. From the beginning. Her lips parted, but before she could speak, the rooftop elevator doors opened behind them. A man in his mid-30s, wearing a tailored coat and a crooked smile, stepped out holding a box wrapped in twine. Isaiah raised an eyebrow. You're late. Traffic, the man shrugged. And someone gave me the wrong delivery address. Twice. Lena looked between them, confused. What is that? Isaiah took the box and handed it to her. Open it. She hesitated, then untied the twine. Inside was a hardcover book, its title embossed in gold. She flipped it open. The inside pages were blank except for the first one. In Isaiah's familiar handwriting, Chapter 1, The Day I Fell in Love with My Neighbor. Her breath caught. I had it made, he said quietly. A journal. For us. Every moment. Every memory. From the hallway to here. I want to fill it with everything we build together. Lena traced the edge of the page. You remembered everything. Every word. Every look. Every time you made me feel like a man, not a brand. She closed the book and held it against her chest. You really don't do anything halfway, do you? Not when it comes to you. He took both her hands in his. I've never asked anyone this before, but I'd like you to move in here with me. Not because it's easier. Not because it's beautiful. But because I want to wake up next to you and fall asleep knowing you're safe. And because I can't imagine another day where you're not part of my world. Her eyes glistened as she whispered, Isaiah, there's no pressure, he said, his voice softer now. If you need time, I don't, she interrupted. He blinked. I don't need time, Lena repeated. I needed to know that I could keep being myself, that I wouldn't disappear in your orbit. And you've shown me over and over that I only shine brighter around you. He exhaled slowly as if releasing something he hadn't realized he was holding. I want the mornings and the burnt toast and the quiet Sundays, Lena continued. I want the chaos too. All of it. As long as it's with you. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against him as the wind whipped around them. I love you, he whispered into her hair. She looked up, eyes steady. I love you too. Below them, the city continued its endless rhythm, cars, voices, lights, but up here, it was just the two of them. No titles, no expectations. Just two people who had stumbled into each other's lives in the most unexpected way and decided to stay. Later that week, Lena moved into the apartment with only 3 boxes and a cat who quickly claimed the warmest windowsill. Isaiah cleared space in his closet, in his schedule, and in his life without hesitation. 1 month later, they hosted a dinner on the rooftop. Just a few close friends, string lights, and a meal they cooked together. Tessa leaned over her plate, grinning. You know, I always said something wild would happen at that hospital. Lena laughed. You didn't say I'd end up falling for the guy next door. Isaiah took her hand under the table. No, he said, smiling at her with every ounce of love he had. You didn't fall. We found each other. And they never let go. Lena's phone buzzed on the counter as she pushed open the window above the sink, letting in a breeze tinged with rain and the distant scent of roasted chestnuts from a street cart below. She glanced at the screen, unknown number. She didn't answer. The apartment was too quiet, too peaceful to let anything interrupt it. Isaiah's voice carried in from the study, low and focused. He was on a call, likely something to do with the tech merger he'd mentioned last night while they shared leftovers on the living room floor, her head resting against his shoulder as he absent-mindedly played with strands of her hair. That call could wait. Everything else could wait. She turned back to the pot simmering on the stove. They were hosting a small dinner tonight, just 4 people, all from Isaiah's orbit, none of whom she'd met. She should have been nervous, but she wasn't. Not anymore. There was something grounding about being here, in this space they were now making truly theirs. Her toothbrush sat beside his. Her books were tucked beside his framed photos. The cat had claimed both of them equally. Behind her, footsteps padded across the hardwood. Smells like you've patented comfort, Isaiah said, slipping an arm around her waist. You're supposed to be on a call, she replied, not turning around. I told them I had more pressing matters. You count. Lena smiled as he kissed the side of her neck. You're going to make someone very nervous by walking away mid-negotiation. They'll survive. I've got better negotiations in this kitchen. She turned in his arms. You're not charming your way out of chopping the herbs. Was worth a try. They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side. He sliced, she stirred. The occasional brush of fingers or a glance shared over the cutting board made the apartment warmer than the oven ever could. It was real. Domestic, but not dull. Familiar, but never boring. When the doorbell rang that evening, Lena wiped her hands on a towel and exhaled slowly. You ready? Isaiah asked softly, straightening the collar of his charcoal sweater. I think so. He opened the door to reveal a woman in a tailored blazer and a man clutching a bottle of whiskey like it was a sacred relic. Introductions were made quickly. Jordan and Elise, both from Isaiah's board, both warm in a way Lena hadn't expected. As the night stretched on, the conversation drifted from business to books to travel. Elise asked about the cafe Lena used to work at, and Lena surprised herself by speaking about it with affection instead of detachment. It was part of her story, not her definition. At one point, Jordan raised a glass. Isaiah, I have to say I've never seen you like this. Relaxed. Human. Isaiah glanced at Lena and smiled. That's because for a long time I forgot what it meant to live for something other than the next deal. She reminded me. Later, after the guests left and the last dish was washed, Lena curled up on the couch while Isaiah locked the door. He returned with 2 glasses of wine and pressed one into her hand before settling beside her. They liked you, he said. I liked them. Elise offered to send me a list of event vendors. Apparently, she thinks I'm underestimating my planning instincts. You are, he said. But I'm glad you're finally starting to see what I've known since the hallway muffin days. She leaned her head against his shoulder. I still have doubts. Not about us. Just about where I fit in sometimes. I don't want you to fit in, he said. I want you to stand out. You always have. She turned to face him, tucking her legs beneath her. What if we mess this up? We won't, he said. Because we've already been through the hard part, figuring out who we are when we strip everything else away. Now we just choose each other. Every single day. She set her glass down. Then I'm choosing you. Every day. Isaiah leaned in and kissed her, slow and certain, like a promise sealed without ceremony. 2 months later, Lena stood in front of a room filled with strangers and whispers. Her hand trembled slightly around the edge of the champagne flute, but her gaze never left Isaiah's from across the ballroom. The event was a charity gala, one of the first she'd helped plan in her new role. It was the kind of night where people wore tuxedos out of habit and the wine cost more than most people's mortgage. She'd walked into the venue uncertain, but now standing beside Isaiah as the spotlight turned toward them, she felt nothing but clarity. The MC tapped the microphone. Mr. Jennings has prepared a few words. Isaiah stepped forward, but instead of facing the crowd, he turned to her. I was supposed to talk about the foundation, he said, his voice carrying easily through the hush. But I can't. Not without saying this first. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, flat box. The room drew a collective breath. Lena's heart slammed in her chest. I never cared about legacy until I met you. I never understood what it meant to build something lasting until you walked into my life and made everything make sense. So I'm asking here and now if you'll marry me. Not because a ring or a title completes us, but because you already have. Her knees nearly gave out. She didn't wait for the box to open. Yes, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Yes. The applause that followed was deafening, but all she heard was the sound of his laughter as he pulled her into his arms and kissed her like they were alone in the world. Later, as they danced on the rooftop, she rested her head against his chest. This is our story, he whispered. And we're just getting started. They married in the spring in a garden strung with lights and filled with wildflowers. No press, no spectacle. Just vows spoken beneath the open sky and a promise sealed with a kiss that lingered long after the guests departed. They bought a smaller townhouse near the park, filled it with books, laughter, and the scent of cinnamon tea. Lena launched her own boutique planning firm, and Isaiah stepped back slightly from the front lines of his company, choosing mornings at home and quiet evenings over boardroom battles. They didn't chase perfection. They chose presence. In the end, it wasn't the penthouse or the skyline or the grand gestures that defined their love. It was the way he refilled her tea mug without asking. The way she left notes in his briefcase. The way they looked at each other across crowded rooms, always knowing, always choosing. And every night, before the lights dimmed, Lena would reach for the leather-bound journal on the nightstand and write a few lines. Each page filled slowly, deliberately with the life they were building. A life they'd never expected, but one they wouldn't trade for anything.